Okay, so we saw the beginning of the Maimon on Thursday. Ledodi. We learned that that's all about Isarusa de Latata, arousal from below. Ledodi, the Alter Rebbe explains, is the revelation from above on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But that requires explanation, because if so, then why is V'doidi Li part of the acronym of Anila Doidi V'doidi Li? Why is it part of the acronym of Elul? Right? The Vav and the Lamed or Tishrei. Right? So our first, very quickly, the Alter Rebbe answers that by telling us that Elul is a preparation for the Gilui, for the revelation of Tishrei. Okay. But the last thing we saw in the first paragraph was, but there must be some level in which there's a revelation from above, a reality of Doidi Li, my beloved is to me, also in Elul, because it's part of the acronym of Elul. Okay, that's one of the first things we saw. All right, that was the first paragraph. Then the Rebbe continues and says, what is revealed in Elul? The Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. 13 attributes of mercy, which are now called the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, and that's all they're called. The Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim are revealed in Elul, and that is not, I know the Rebbe uses the word once, but we're ignoring that word. Well, again, we said many times already on Thursday, we'll understand why the Rebbe uses the word Hisarus at this point. But that is not a Hisarus. It's not an arousal from above. It's simply an asinus koyach, an empowerment from above. In other words, you and I have to do the work, but then the wind might be at our back. But you and I have to do it. We explained that in terms of real avodah. What does that mean? That means it's easier to keep a achlota made in Elul than any other time of year. But you have to keep the achlota to make the achlota and keep it. Right? It's still hard work. But there'll be wind at your back, and you'll encounter less opposition to the performance of that hachlata in Elul. That's it. The Rebbe didn't say that, but that's the explanation of the idea of nesinas kayach, an empowerment, right? And that's the advantage of, this is the last thing we saw, that's the advantage of the Aved of Elul over the Aved of the Yisrael Shemei Tshuva, because the Aved of the Yisrael Shemei Tshuva is all based on the revelation from above. And the connection that we feel to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, as beautiful as it is, and amazing as it is, and uplifting as it is, it's not me. It's coming from the fact that it's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and after Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, I revert back to who I was before, whereas any Avodah of Elul is taka me. It's coming from me, and therefore it's part of me, and it stays with me. Okay, that's what we saw so far. Gimel. Ubechdei levar shnei inyanim hanach. Now, we don't have to remember what these two things are, because the Rebbe is going to tell us. Sometimes just says, in order to explain these two things, then you don't have to remember what the two things are. Here, the Rebbe is very kind to us, and he's going to explain what they are. In order to explain these two things, Bahagilu, the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim be'Elul, that were said in the previous paragraph regarding the revelation of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim shebe'Elul, they'll think we're giving the Shir on Eastern Parkway. Shagilui de'elul hu l'kol echad ve'echad. One idea is that the revelation is for every single Jew. Gam l'rechokim b'yesi, even to those farthest away. The Rebbe said that in the third line. U'shaf al pikein, and nevertheless, hagilui einu ma'er es ha'adam. The second thing we learned is the gilui does not arouse the person. It's not inspiration from above. V'hu rak, and it's only an asinus koyach. Those two things. Aleph, Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim and Elul, which is happening right now as we speak. Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim and Elul is Aleph, shayach to every single Jew, regardless of where they are, spiritually. Base, it's only an asinus koyach, it's not a hisarus. And we've talked on Thursday about the difference between those two. Mamshich b'maimer, so he continues in the maimer. Shagilui, the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim be'Elul, that the revelation of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim shebe'Elul hu dugmas melech b'sada. This is the famous mashal of the melech b'sada that Baruch Hashem has been borrowed by everybody. Right? Everybody talks about Elul being the melech b'sada. I once saw someone sent me a link so that I would look at this to the Eisha Torah website, and Eisha Torah talked about king in the field. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Right? Chassidus, we don't want Chassidus to be our own private little So this is for everybody, and if everybody learns it, we're in better shape. Right? So Baruch Hashem, Melech B'Sadas. Now, what's Melech B'Sadas? So we're going to learn the original mashal, and the Rebbe is going to explain that mashal very, very carefully, every single detail of the mashal, because there's part of the mashal that probably most people have not heard and was not in the Torah website. Most people just said the Melech is in this field. Anybody who wants to come see the king can come see the king. Oh, there's much more to the mashal than that. Let's see. Amongst the differences between the king in the field and the king in his palace, there are two things. Now, it just happens to be interesting. Maybe you don't find this interesting. I find this interesting. When the Rebbe was Magia the Mimer, when the Rebbe edited the Mimer, and we talked about that on Thursday, what that means. So this is an edited Mimer. That means Rav Yoel wrote up the Mimer, and the Rebbe edited. So now, the Haggais of the Rebbe, the emendations of the Rebbe have been published. We've always had them, but they've been around. But it's not like they were hidden away. There's certain things that the Rebbe kept private. Unfortunately, those things have also been published, right? But there's other things the Rebbe didn't keep private. They just were never published. They were just there, but no one ever no one decided it was a good idea to publish them. So the emendations of the Rebbe on this Mimer were published fairly recently. And if you look there, it's very, very interesting. Rav Yoel wrote, Hachiluk Bey, the difference between the Melech B'Sada and the Melech in his palace, the Melech in the king in the field and the Melech in his palace. The Rebbe crosses that out and writes, Demi Hachilukim, amongst the differences there is. Rav Yoel wrote the difference. The Rebbe wrote amongst the differences. So that's a clear example of the Rebbe's editing what Rav Yoel wrote. It's very interesting. I find those things interesting. If you don't, okay, say that's okay. Mashiach's going to come anyway. Amen. So there's two differences amongst the differences. B'nagel dargas hagilui, regarding the level of revelation. The level that is revealed. The essential revelation of the king in all his beauty and all his glory, a pasuk in Yeshayahu, Melech b'yofi techazena enecho. Yes, can you take it out? There were no staples. Can you take out a copy? I think there's three there, so take out one, please. Right? Remind me, please, or if someone can do it right now. If someone has a blank piece of paper, if that blank piece of paper can go around the room, and you can write two things on that blank piece of paper. There we go, Doctor, thank you. Your name and last name, John Doe, right? And then your name and then the son of your mother. Okay, because I'd like to write the Rebbe and tell the Rebbe who's in the class. Okay, so that's with your mother's name. So John Doe and then John Bas Sally. Okay, I don't think that'll be the name, but you get it, right? Okay, you don't have to give me your family name because I have your family name from John Doe. When we write the Rebbe, we write the family name, but I'll have the family name. Okay, so you don't have to write the family name twice, but your mother's name I don't have. Okay. Where's the greatest expression of the king in all his glory? He's in the palace. He has the garments of the kingship, and he has the keser, he has the crown on his head. That's not the case when he's in the Sada. What's the king wearing in the Sada? A suit. Prince Charles, right? The best expression of monarchy is still the English. They're good at it. Okay, now it was better when it was the Queen. But okay, it's the way it goes. When you see Prince Charles in public, what's he wearing? He's wearing a very nice suit that probably none of us can afford, right? Okay, he's wearing a very nice suit. He's put together and he's wearing a nice, unless he's playing polo. But I don't know if he does that anymore, he's older, right? But he's wearing a nice suit, okay. Now, I haven't seen him do this, but if you want to see what monarchy really looks like, there is a way you can see at least the queen. I guess also the king. I don't know. I've never seen Charlie do this, but I've seen Queen Elizabeth do this. If you can go on YouTube, and Google, Google or whatever it'll take you back. The Queen opening Parliament. Do the Queen because it's better, because queens are dressed up more fancily than kings, right? Queen opening Parliament. When the Queen opens Parliament, so she's dressed like a queen. She's wearing an attire that is worth more than the gross national product of half the countries in the world, right? She's got jewelry all over. She's got clothes that, it's not wearing regular clothes that she wears when she's, inaugurating a factory in Birmingham. That's not what she's wearing. She's wearing like a crazy gown with this trail behind it that people are carrying as she walks up the steps. It's fascinating. She's on a throne higher than who? Who's sitting there? What are they called? What's that room called? House of Commons. What does Commons mean?
Just regular.
Not royalty. I mean, these are the commons. These are the representatives of the common people. Okay, Manyen. And she's the queen. And what does she still do when she gives her speech? I think it's called Speech of the Throne. I think that's what it's called. I grew up in Canada. This is all part of it. Speech of the Throne. It's fascinating. She outlines which legislation she'd like her government to pass in this session of Parliament. Now, they told her, because the way it works now, they told her which bills they're interested in passing. Okay. But then she, as the head of Parliament, she can dissolve Parliament at any time. She doesn't. So Charles can dissolve Parliament at any time. If Charles decides that he doesn't like who's in charge, dissolve Parliament and call for elections. That's the law. They don't use that right, but they have that right. Right? So she tells her government, because it's her government, what she wants them to do in this session of Parliament. But what's interesting is you see what royalty really looks like, and it's really quite astounding. It's not, it's whoa. These people are serious about this. They're good at this, right? This pageantry, the English, they're the best at this. They're not very good at much else, but they're good at that. Okay. So if you want to see what the king in the palace looks like, that's the closest you'll get. King in the field? King in the field is everybody's seen pictures of Prince Charles around with his family. It's not a hard thing to see. What does he look like? He looks like anybody else, right? Okay. So if you really want to see what majesty is, what royalty is, so then you have to see the king in the palace. Aval hagilui atzmai, but the revelation itself, meaning, so to speak, the quantity of the revelation as opposed to the quality of the revelation. Where do you actually see the king? Well, where have you ever seen a picture of King Charles? Out. Not in the, you don't see pictures of him in the palace. Although you might have seen a picture of his coronation. Well, actually, it looks pretty kingly there. It's not true. That was fairly recent, so people might have even seen that. I'm still living in the past, where the Queen was coronated 65 years ago, so I'm not going to tell you about it. I remember grade 1, right, standing on Granville Street, waving a Union Jack. Canada at that point didn't have its own flag; it had a Union Jack. So the maple leaf flag, that didn't exist in those days.
Really?
Yeah, it came in. When I was a kid, it came in. The red and the red. There was a whole thing. What should they do? They were thinking of blue with a red maple leaf in the middle, the two C's, but they ended up red. And of course, half the people were upset and half the people were happy. So we were waving Union Jacks because that's what the Canadian flag was. It was a Union Jack, just like Britain. And the Queen drove by. We were all out there, our elementary school, we were all out there waving our flags as the Queen drove by. And I had this memory in my head, and I wondered whether it was true or not, because you have certain childhood memories, and then it's many years later. I mean, for you guys, it's not as many, but it's many. This is over 60 years ago now. So I wondered, did this happen, or did I just, sort of, it's in there, but it never really happened. So I asked my older brother. He said, "Yeah, was in grade 5, he remembers. He said, yeah, we went. And then we looked up, we Googled when the Queen visited Canada. So sure enough, she visited Canada when I was in grade 1. She's been in Vancouver when I was in grade 1. So it's a real memory. Waving the Union Jack at the Queen. Right, okay. So there's something called a king and a queen, which is really very, very interesting. And it's something that Americans have a hard time with. And that's why complete bittul in religious terms for people who live in democracies is very, very difficult. Because you're not bottled to anybody, because you can disagree with them and kick them out. That's why with David Haradoker, when the Tsar was overthrown at the time of the revolution in Russia in 1917, so he had fled because things were a little crazy, and someone came to him and said, David Haradoker was a famous chassid. Just give you an example of who David Haradoker is. After the war, so he was in the part of the Soviet Union that was, they basically left it alone, Samarkand, Tashkent over there. So the Yidden could manage, they had no food, but they could manage to not be, run after, etc. They avoided the Nazis and avoided the Soviets over there, even though it was run by the Soviets. It was just much less draconian. So he was there, and then after the wars, there was a good chance to get out because everything was hefker, so the borders were just, no one was standing at the borders, so you could just walk across, or there was a guard, but no one cared. So I think he was in one of the hijacked trains that Mendel was hijacking trains and driving them out of Russia and getting people out of Russia so they could get to the West. So he got to a particular border, I don't know what border it was, and they asked for his passport, David Haradoker. So you don't have a passport. I said, passport? What do I need a passport for? I said, so we need a picture of you. So he said, well, what do you need a picture of? I'm here. I'm right here. This is me. Why do you need a picture of me? This is what I look like. That was David Haradoker. And they let him through. I said, okay, what are you going to do with a guy like that? So they just let him through. Okay, go. So that was David Haradoker. So when David Haradoker heard about the fall of the Soviet Union, he said, there's no more mashal for Malchus. There's no more parable for what a king is. You don't vote on God. God says we do, because that's what a king is. You can vote on a prime minister or a president, and if he says something, someone say it. I don't like it. Reagan's joke about the difference between Russia and America, right? The Russian and American are talking, Soviet and American are talking, and the American says the difference between you and me is I can walk into my president's office and I can bang on the desk and say, Mr. President Reagan, I don't like your job. I don't like the job you're doing. And the Russian says, I can do that. So what do you mean you can do that? Sure, I can walk into Mr. Brezhnev's office and I can bang on the desk and say, Mr. Brezhnev, I don't like the job that President Reagan is doing. Okay. So there's a difference. And that's why two things are less powerful in democracies than in autocracies: religion and family. Democracy has also been a disaster for the family because a family is not a democratic institution, it's an autocratic institution. Parents say and children do. And that's gone. And the family has fallen apart. In America, there's vestiges of it, but only vestiges of it. 65-70% of black children in America don't grow up in a family with two parents. They grow up without a father. That's a pretty serious percentage.
Wow.
Okay, that's a king. So where's the king? The king on the throne. And Esther's married to the king, and she's absolute terror of the king, right? I don't want to go in. I can't go in. Mordechai says, no, you have to go in. So she goes, but Mesiras Nefesh. It's her husband. But he could kill her at any moment. God forbid. Aval, a gilui atzmai, but the revelation itself, the quantity of the revelation, where do I really see the king? How do I know what King Charles looks like? Because he's been in the Sada. I don't see all the glory of it. I don't see him as a king, but I see him. The b'yosef beheichel malchusei, that when he's in his palace, ein nichnasim alav, they don't enter into his presence ella except bereshus, with permission. And who gets permission? V'raka muvcharim, the ones who are chosen, Shaba'am, the chosen people of the Am, the ministers and the family members, v'yechidei skula, and people who are very, very special. But your average person never gets into the king in his chambers. U'b'yosef b'sada, now the very important lines that the Rebbe says, and the Alter Rebbe. There's all the Alter Rebbe's. The Alter Rebbe's mashal for Melech B'Sada explaining Elul, and that is used here in this mimer to explain two things about the Gilui of the Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim. One is it's for everyone base, it does not arouse, it's only in the Sinas Koyach. In the Alter Rebbe's mimer, he is not bringing the mashal for that reason. In the Alter Rebbe's mimer, he's bringing the mashal to explain the idea that Elul is not a Yom Tif. Even though there's a tremendous revelation of God throughout the whole month is not Yom Tif, it's still Chol. Right? Okay? That's why the Alter Rebbe brings this mashal. The Rebbe is using the mashal to explain something else. Our Rebbe, in this mimer. So what does the Alter Rebbe say? These are the words of the Alter Rebbe, almost all of them. Rishayim, they are permitted. With an ayin, it means an evil person. With an aleph, it means permitted. Okay? Rishayim, v'yecholim, and able. Permitted and able. Now that word, able, right? If you look in footnote 11, very important. The Frierdiker Rebbe added that word to the mashal in 1940, meaning 6 generations after the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said they're permitted. The Frierdiker Rebbe added, and able. Because obviously I could be permitted to do something, but I'm still not able to do it. There is no law against jumping to the moon. I just can't. Right? I have reshut, but I don't have the yecholet to do that. There are things that I have the yecholet to do, but I'm not allowed to. Right? Obviously. Right? All sorts of things. I can drive my car 160 kilometers an hour. That's not a problem. It'll go that fast. I'm just not allowed to. Right? Okay. So the Frierdiker Rebbe added the word Yecholim. It's obviously very important. Not only are we permitted to go see the king, we're able to go see the king. We can actually do it. Rishayim v'yecholim lahakbil panav. They are permitted and able to receive his countenance, meaning to go greet the king. Kol mi sherotzeh. Anybody who wants. V'melech mekabel es kulam b'sever panim yafes, and the king receives them all graciously. Mekabel es kulam, he receives them. B'sever panim yafes. Sever panim yafes means graciously. Umara, and he shows panim sheicha case lekulam, and he shows a shining face to all. Now that word sheicha case could also be seicha case, smiling face. Sometimes the Rebbe said that. Most of the time the Rebbe said sheicha kais with a shin, which means, lishchok means to polish silver. So it means a shining face. Al pi Kabbalah, the difference between a shin and a sin is chesed and gvura. The dot on the shin is on the right, that's chesed. The dot on the sin is on the left, that's gvura. It might be that's why the Rebbe always says sheicha case. Now and then the Rebbe said sheicha case, generally sheicha case, even though we're going to see that word is going to be understood as schoik, as joy, not as shining later on in the mimer. So the explanation is it's going to be panim seicha case. But if you listen to the Rebbe say that this mashal, and we have many recordings of it, the Rebbe will say panim sheicha case, generally, which is interesting. That just might be because of the Kabbalah of the Shin and the Sin. It might be because that's what the Rebbe thinks the Bible. I don't know. V'melech mekabel es kulam b'sefer panim yafes umara, and he shows panim sheicha case lekulam, a shining face to all. 2 responses of the king. He accepts them and shows them, 2 verbs and 2 adjectives. Sever panim yafes, a welcoming face, and a shining face. Okay, well, obviously we're going to have to understand that. What's the difference in those 2? Because the Alter Rebbe doesn't say 2 things if it's the same. Val derech zeh, similarly, banimshal, in the analog, that which the mashal is explaining. A mashal is a parable, a nimshal is the analog that's explained by the parable. Shagilui, the Rosh Hashanah of Yom Kippur, the revelation of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Val derech zeh, and in this way, b'ser shemei tshuva b'chlal, the 10 days of tshuva in general. Shuhu b'dugmas, what's that similar to? Melech beicholoi, the king in his palace. Hu ba'ofen, that is in a way. Shagilui ma'erer sa'adam. The revelation arouses a person. A person cannot be in the presence of the king in his palace and not be awestruck by the majesty of the king. It's just not shaykh. Okay. Whereas if the king's in the field, the person might not even know who the king is. Right? They're looking around. Which one is the king over there? Now the queen was easier to find. Right? Well, okay. First of all, she had on one of those gaudy little hats she used to wear. But in all fairness, she was one of the few women over there. Usually it was a bunch of men opening a factory in Birmingham. Who's opening the factory in Birmingham? Usually men. That's not a terrible thing. That's just reality, especially most of the time that the queen was queen. Right? So there's this one lady in the middle cutting the ribbon. Okay, now you see 6 guys standing in 500-pound suits. 1,000-pound suits. Right? Which one's Chuck? Well, if I don't know what he looks like, I'm not sure yet. Right? It's one of those guys. But I've never seen him. I wouldn't necessarily recognize him. Right? I know he's there. So I want to see him. I'm looking. Which one is the king? Okay. Because it's not awe-inspiring.
Rabbi, do you wonder the fact that he diluted the monarchy now, that in some sense that's why he may not be noticeable? Like there was more respect for the monarchy actually was a true monarchy?
Well, I don't think that any Englishman would not know which one is Charles. Right? You know the famous story Queen Elizabeth told? Actually, what do they call the guy who's right next to her? Right of arms or something? The guy who followed her around all the time. He told an amazing story, great story. The royal family has a you know the story, it has a house in Scotland. Balmoral or something. You can imagine it must be gorgeous, right? They have a house, they have a palace in Scotland. So the Queen used to go there every summer. She used to go for walks. She liked going for walks. And she didn't wear a crown when she went for walks. She wore clothes that one would do, walking in the country in Scotland in the summertime. With, shoes like a walker would wear. Okay. And she had this guy next to her. Always. He was always there. So they were walking along. And along the path came a couple, and it sounded like there were 3 or 4 American tourists. And the American tourists saw this couple walking, said, "Oh, hello," and they said, "Hello, how are you?" And the Queen said, "Hello, welcome." And the American tourists asked, they said, "Are you from around here?" So the Queen said, "Yes, well, I have a summer house here." "Oh, very nice, that's nice." So they said to her, "Well, we heard that the Queen has a house around here. Have you ever seen her?" So evidently she had a sense of humor, because she said, "Well, I haven't, but he has," pointing to this guy standing next to her. So they said, "Oh, amazing. They said to him, "Could we get a picture with you?" And they handed the Queen the camera that she should take a picture of them with him. Americans, much. This guy told the story about that, right? So I don't know what happened exactly. So the Queen did say later, because she did have a sense of humor, she said, "I wish I were the fly on the wall when they show those pictures," because she got in the picture in the end, right? They took, right? When they show those pictures to their friends back home, because someone is going to know who she is, right? You say, That's Queen Elizabeth. Right? But they didn't. Okay. But that wouldn't happen to an Englishman. It's not shaykh, right? And that wouldn't happen to a Canadian, and it wouldn't happen to an Australian, and it wouldn't happen to a New Zealander, and it wouldn't happen to someone from Hong Kong, and it wouldn't, right? Or India. There's 1 billion people in India. Most of them know what the Queen looked like, right? Most, not all. Right? There's certainly the 500 million of the middle class in India all know what the Queen looked like. So, I don't know. I hear what you're saying. But David R. Docker said it about the Tsar. When you see a monarch, you make a bracha. I once made the bracha because I was taken somewhere where the Queen of Netherlands was there. And I asked her, Psak, and I like, is she enough of a queen that I can make a bracha? And I was told, yeah. So I made the bracha. Chilek kveidei levasav v'damar. Chilek malchusei levasav v'dam, mashu gazeh. But of course, the Kadosh Baruch Hu apportions his honor, apportions his kingship to people of flesh and blood. Mashu gazeh, that's the bracha. If you see Prince Charles on the street some morning, I'll make a bracha. Valderech zeh b'nimshal. Let's see. Shagilui the Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur. Valderech zeh b'seis me'tshuva b'chlal shuva dugmas melech v'echolo. That's the king in his palace. Hu ba'ofen. That's in a way. Shagilui ma'eres adam. It arouses in us a desire and a fear of the king. B'dugmas melech v'echolo b'levushe malchus u'keser malchus. When he's in the garments and the crown of the kingship. Shehu matil eima v'fachad. It instills fear. Two different words for fear. Fear and dread and fear. Aval, b'chdei shadam yargi shagilu d'Rosh Yom Kippur, but in order to fully experience, all of us experience something, but in order to fully experience the revelation of the king on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which means we're in the king's palace. That's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The king brings us into his palace, and we'll see. The mashal of the Alter Rebbe is that if we go see the king in the field in Elul, then what happens? Where does the king go Rosh Hashanah? He goes back to the palace. Who goes with him? Everybody who went to see him in the field, not just his ministers. Everybody who went to see him in the field is schlepped back into the palace with the king. That's the idea of going to see the king in the field, is a preparation for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. So how do I truly experience Rosh Hashanah and Kippur? I have to prepare an Elul. But everybody has a certain, we talked about this yesterday or Thursday, everybody has a certain Isarus on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. That's why Jews who don't go to shul any other day of the year go to shul. That's why Jews who do go to shul every day daven better, because there's Isarus, there's no question there's an arousal from above. Okay. But to take full advantage of that takes work. That you should truly feel this revelation of Yom Kippur. But truly, Hu Be'ikr is essentially, not completely, because it's possible to feel it without Elul, as many Jews do, but to fully take advantage of the opportunity of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Hu Be'ikr la'achrei, after Kedimas Aveda, the Aveda of Chodesh Elul, preparing through the month of Elul for the revelation of Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. How? Shal Yedei Zeh, that as a result of this, Hu Nasa Miha Mivcharim Sheba'am V'Yechidei Skulo, the people who went to see the king have now become the special ones. Everybody can be one of the special ones if they go see the king in the field. Now I have to understand what that means to go see the king in the field. Or does that mean I get in the car and drive to Tzfas? I don't think that's it. Shenichnasim laheichel hamelech, that enter into the heichel hamelech. Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, the king goes back to the palace, or do we go with him? Vagilui de Elul dugmas melech b'sada. The revelation of Elul is similar to the king in the field. And what's that? Hu ba'ofen, it's in such a way, shagilui eina ma'erer es adam, it doesn't arouse the person. V'urak nasinas kerech laveda, this is the third or fourth time the Rebbe told us this. It doesn't arouse the person. It's only an asinas kerech, an empowerment, the wind at our back, so to speak. Now in the Mashal of the Melech B'Sada, okay, so the road to the Sada has been paved, but I still have to get in the car and drive. whatever that means in Ruchnius. Obviously, it doesn't mean that. Okay. Aval hanasinis kerech laveda. This empowerment shall yedei gilu is that it comes as a result of this revelation of the Yud Gimel Midas Arachim, which is the king in the field. Who l'kol echad ve'echad gam l'rechakim b'yesa. It's for every single Jew, even those farthest away. The king is in the field, and the king is waiting for us to come. So the Eibishter is revealed in Olam Hazeh in a way that is unusual, and he's waiting for us to come. And as we go through the Maimer, we'll understand that more and more. But we have the basic mashal. A mashal is a mashal. You have to understand the mashal and all the details of the mashal to truly appreciate what we're being taught. That everybody can go. The Dugmas Melech Basada, like the king in the field. The Kishamelech hu b'matzav zeh, when the king is in this situation, ain't a matal lima b'fachad. He doesn't instill fear. Because if he instills fear, then people will stay away. But no, people are drawn to the king in the field. When people hear the king is in the field, they run out to go see the king in the field. Why do they want to go see the king in the field? It doesn't scare them. Ubafrat, particularly, now the Rebbe talks about something very interesting, because in the mashal, so the other Rebbe talks about 3 different groups of people, really 2, but there's a third. Here the Rebbe is going to talk about 2 also, but there's also a third. There's the people who live in the city. They don't live in the suburb. They live in the city. What are they used to? If you live in the city where the king lives, you see the king around. He's around, right? You're on the wrong side. Actually, no. Well, yeah, but still you're not going to see it because we're a little far away. But if you lived closer to, what's it called, Derech Rupin, right? I used to drive on Derech Rupin every day. I used to park my car in, what's it called, those big buildings down the street, Wolfson. I used to park my car in Wolfson and walk to the Yeshiva the first years of Mayanot, 28 years ago. Right? Okay, they used to let me park there, and it was less than 10-minute walk from there to Mayanot. Fine. So very often, driving along Rupin, what's on Rupin on the left? Well, there's this building called the Knesset. If you keep driving, what's ahead of you? The Prime Minister's house. So what would you see once a week? What do they call it? The
motorcade.
Motorcade, thank you. The motorcade of the Prime Minister would pass going usually the other way, because I was driving in the morning, right? It would go the other way from his house to the Knesset. So that was fairly common. Well, that's what you would see in Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim, you see a lot of motorcades. Why? Well, because it's Yerushalayim, and there's just a lot happening. And you'll see motorcades here in this town of flags on a car that aren't Israeli flags. Oh, the president of Spain is visiting, so there'll be a motorcade at Washington, D.C. He lives near Washington, D.C. What do you see all the time in Washington? All the time, right? Washington is a little more important than Yerushalayim in these matters. All the time, motorcades, back and forth. So if you live in the city, you see vestiges of the seat of power all the time. Los Angeles, motorcade. Well, I mean, if the Lakers win the championship, there might be a motorcade, but other than that, not. Right? Nothing happens. Why? Not that it's not an important place, but it's not anywhere near where things really happen. So nothing happens. Okay. Hollywood stars don't have motorcades. Okay. Politicians do. So you see that in the ear, in the city. The people in the Sada, they're far from where the king is. And that's why Dafka, the king, is in the Sada. He's not only in the Sada, he's for the people in the Sada. The people in the Sada who aren't the people who are in the city. So who are the people in the city? The people in the city are the people who are very sensitive to the king's presence in their lives. The people in Ruchnius. People who are very sensitive to the presence of the Kadosh Baruch in their lives, so they live in the city, so to speak. They're right by the palace of the king all the time. Okay, people who live in the Sabed, not so sensitive to it doesn't mean they don't know there's a king, but they're not so sensitive to the king's presence in their midst. They're busy with their work in the field. And then there's the people in the desert, which we'll run into, and they're completely oblivious to what's going on in the spiritual desert. So those are the people in the pub. Okay, so let's see. So here the Rebbe mentions the frat, particularly Aleilu and Nimsoim B'Soda. The people found in the Soda. So who do they represent? Shehem B'Darg and Nemucha. They're on a lower level than the people who live in the city. Again, in the Moshel, the people who live in the city are the people who are sensitive to the presence of the... Well, in the Moshel, there are people who live near the king. In the Nimshel, there are people who are sensitive to the presence of the king in their lives. They live in the city. Then there's the people in the Soda who are less sensitive. Again, that doesn't mean they don't believe in the existence of the king. It's just not an everyday thing. Furthermore, when the king is in this situation in the Soda, now the Rebbe says something very, very interesting. He's going to take issue with this later in the Mimer, but right now this is definitely reasonable to say within the context of the Moshel. In addition, when the king's in the field, he doesn't even arouse a desire to see him. See in the Soda? And he looks like everybody else. So it doesn't arouse in everybody a desire to go see the king. Later on in the Maimon, the Rebbe is going to say that it might, okay? But a simple shot in the Moshel is that it doesn't. That's the whole idea. The king's in the Soda, and the king is coming to open a factory in Birmingham, so I don't drive from Manchester to Birmingham to go see the king. Maybe if he's opening one in Manchester and it's down the block from where I work, so I'll go back. I'm not driving the hour from Manchester to Birmingham to go see the king open the factory in Birmingham, right? Okay. Look at footnote 12, please. That which is not the case when he's in his palace. A number of people will hope and wait for days and years to see his power and his glory. Right? Interestingly enough, in modern day terms, what does everybody who goes to visit London do?
See the palace.
Go see Buckingham Palace, right? They don't even see the king or queen in, but they go see the seat of the kingship. Everybody will do it. Everybody wants to go see Buckingham Palace. Which is interesting, right? If you flew into Manchester, you're not going to get it. You're not going to drive down to go see Buckingham Palace. But if you're in London, I mean, who's in London doesn't go to Buckingham Palace? I mean, you want to go see Buckingham Palace? No, not yet. Are they in there? I don't know. They don't live there, right? Where do they live? Well, I mean, where did she live? I don't know where he lives, but where did she live? Americans don't know these things. It's all right. You don't have to. It's only England. Windsor Castle. She lived in Windsor Castle, which is another part of London. That was their actual house. That was the house of... She's from the House of Windsor, so I guess Charlie also. They're from the House of Windsor, and they have another castle in London. So I think everything official happened in Buckingham Palace, but where did they go to sleep at night? They went to sleep at night in Windsor Castle, which is another part of London. My daughter is a lawyer in Manchester, so she used to be part of a firm that had an office in London, and every couple of months she'd have to go down to the office in London. And the first time she went, she said, "Oh, this is interesting." She took a picture out the window where she was having a meeting, and Windsor Castle was literally across the street. She said, "That's Windsor Castle across the street." So, okay, that's interesting place to have a meeting. That's where they live. Again, I don't know where Chuck lives. I have no idea. But they have a few houses. They're not like, you don't have to send them chalitz for Shabbos. They're doing okay. Okay. But when the king is in his heichal, people will wait in line to go see the king in the heichal. King in the field? If they know it's there, they might go, but it doesn't necessarily arouse in them a desire to see it, because it's not such an unusual event. That's the moshel. V'zeu shemadayik b'maimer, and that's why the Alter Rebbe is very careful in the Maimer. What does he say? Kol misha roitze lotzeis lahakbil panav. Anybody who wants to go receive the king, meaning you have to want to. That which they go out to greet the king, who mitzad harotzon shalahem, it's a function of their will. They want to go see it. We'll do footnote 13 next time, but first I want to go a little further here. Ella, shenasinas koyach lahakbil es b'nei hamelech, this desire, this empowerment to go see the king, who al yidei shamelech b'sada. I want to go see the king. Say the king's in the palace. You can't go see the king. I want to go see the king. The king's in the field. I can go see the king. Oh, but the only reason that I'm going to get to go see the king is because I want to go see the king. It's all this ladatas, an arousal from below. That's what the whole idea is of this mashal. Sha'az, then b'yesib b'sada, when the king is in the field, yeshnei harashus v'yachelis l'kol echad ve'echad lahaklos b'nei melech. There is the permission and the ability of every single person to go greet the king when the king is in the field, but it's dependent on our ratzon. Okay, in Ois Dalet, the first paragraph, short. We have 3 minutes. We're going to see it very, very quickly. We'll go over it obviously again tomorrow. The Rebbe is going to ask 4 questions. Let's see the questions, and that obviously will be the beginning of the Maimer. So up until now, what have we done? We explained the meaning of Melukat B'Sodeh. It's very important to understand. Okay, but there are questions in the whole story of Melukat B'Sodeh that we have to understand, and once we understand them, we'll have a much greater appreciation of what's really going on in Elul. But Tzarech Lahavin. Now, again, the idea of Melukat B'Sodeh explains 2 things. One is that the revelation is for everybody. The other is that the revelation is only an asinas koyach, it's only an empowerment, and it's not an arousal from above. Again, we talked about the difference between those 2 on Thursday. Okay? We'll see in footnote 13 the idea of arousal from above. Kaf aleim har kegigis. Kadosh Baruch Hu held the mountain above our heads and said, accept the Torah, and if not, I'm going to drop the mountain on you, and that'll be your burial place. Okay, that's called an arousal from above. There's not a lot of choice. That's why we, so to speak, accepted the Torah again with choice, Purim. That's when it came from below. That's a Purim Maimer, many Purim Maimers. But Tzarech Lahavin, the Lechur at first glance, B'Kdei Levar, in order to explain Shagilui de Elul, that the revelation of Elul, Vanasinis Kerek Shal Yedei Hagilui, and the empowerment that comes as a result of this revelation, Hu L'Kol Echad Ve'echad, is to every single person. So then what's relevant? Negeya literally means touch, but in this context it means it's relevant. Rak, only, the Kisham Melech B'Sodeh, that when the king is in the field, Rasha'im V'Yacholim, everyone is permitted and able, Kol Misha Roitze, anybody who wants, Lahakbil Panav. True? That's all that's the part of the mashal everybody knows. But there's a continuation of the mashal, that the king accepts them graciously and shows them a shining face. What's that got to do with it? It's not necessary. All I want to know is the king's available. Oh, so the king's in the field, and anybody wants to go see him can see him. End of mashal. No, not end of mashal. The Alter Rebbe continues in the mashal and tells us more information. V'lama meisif. So then, why does he add the Alter Rebbe in his mashal? Shamelech mekabel es kulam b'sever panim yafes, that the king receives them all graciously, umara panim sheiches lekulam, and shows a shining face to all. Ubifrat, and particularly, this is part of the first question, but we'll call it a second question. Ubifrat, particularly, that which the king greets them all accepts them all graciously, and shows them a shining face. That's the king's response to our avodah of coming to see the king, right? We're going to see it inside, but I want you guys to tell me outside first, because you've already learned it. When does the king respond to our ani ledodi, according to the Alter Rebbe? When's the king's response?
When?
Yeah, when?
We go to the field.
No, not true.
Well,
What?
There's two answers. One is either Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but the other one is that it must also be an Elul.
Okay, but the simple shot, when was the response? Because no, the Elul was not a response. That's the whole question. Elul was before, right? But what's the response of the king? What you said first, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. That's what the Alter Rebbe said, right? Ani ledodi, what's that? You and I going to the Eibishter. What's ledodi li? The Eibishter coming to us. When's that? Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. There must be some expression of ledodi li. Yes, 100%. But simple shot in the response of the king to our ani ledodi. And we didn't see anything different than this at any point. We never saw a different response of the king. You're right. We saw a different explanation of V'dodi Li that's not a response to the king.
There was a question.
Right? But the response of the king was always Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So, in the mashal, where is the king responding? Where is he accepting us graciously and showing us this respect? In the field. He's not responding in the field, according to the Alter Rebbe. Where is he responding? In the palace. That's what the Alter Rebbe told us. Ani ledodi, I go see the king. There was no mashal of King Melukat yet to say that, but this mashal is explaining what the Alter Rebbe said to us. The Alter Rebbe told us that you and I go to see the king in Elul, Ani ledodi, and the king responds Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur by revealing himself to us. Right? That's what we learned. That's what the Alter Rebbe said. That was when Doidi Li was a response to the king. Yes. There was the problem. Wait a minute, there must be a V'dodi Li and Elul. But in that, it wasn't a response to the response of the king. It was a separate shot in V'dodi Li, and that bothered us. Why? It's not just a response of the king. I get it. Okay. So why in the mashal, if the Alter Rebbe told us that Ani ledodi is us going to the king, and V'dodi Li is the king coming to us in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, why in the mashal is there a V'dodi Li of the king coming to us in the field? That's not what's happening. The king's coming to us in the palace. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So let's let the Rebbe ask the question. Lama meisiv shemelech mekabeles kulam v'seif panim yafis ma'apanim sheiks kulam ubefrat particularly fourth line dezeh shemelech mekabeles kulam v'seif panim yafis, that which the king receives everybody v'seif panim yafis umar lem panim sheiks, he shows a shining countenance. Who? That's hamshocha, the drawing down of godliness. Vagilui, and the revelation milamaila, from above. Shalachurei avoda, after our avoda of going to see the king. Veina muva, and it doesn't make sense. It's not understood. Damshocha vagilui shalachrei avoda, the drawing down of godliness and the revelation of godliness that happens after our avoda of ani ledodi. Therefore, the V'dodi Li of it all, when's that? The Alter Rebbe said, Ibn says me true. So why is it happening in the field in the mashal? That doesn't make sense. Okay, let's just see the end. It's very, very quick. But Gam Tzarech Lahavin, now the Rebbe asked two questions, which are really four, but we'll call it two. Gam Tzarech Lahavin, Shnei and Yonim, the two different verbs. Shu Mekablim, the Sefer Panim Yafes. Right, the verb receives, and he shows, he accepts, receives, and shows, two different verbs. V'gam v'negel lemekabla, relative to accepting, it's the two different adjectives. It says a pleasant countenance, but relative to the verb of showing, a shining face. So what's the difference between the two verbs, mekabel and mareh, and what's the difference between the two adjectives, yofes and sheker case, in the motion? This is how you learn a motion. Rebbe's not being annoying. It's called learning Torah. General understanding doesn't cut it. You do not want your doctor to have a general understanding of the operation he's about to do. You want him to know every detail from beginning to end. Okay, so don't learn Torah with less care than you would hope your doctor learned medicine. Torah is, believe it or not, maybe even just as important as medicine. You never know. Maybe even more. Who knows? But I don't want to get the doc mad at me. But he'd agree with me if I said Torah is more important than medicine, so we don't know that. Okay? Say them? Okay, so we just asked a number of questions which you have to answer. Right? Why is the king's response in the field? It should be in the palace, Rosh Hashanah. And the particulars of the response. 2 verbs, 2 adjectives. Say, we'll go back to tomorrow. Okay, and hopefully tomorrow I'll have a stapler, so you guys can have a staple copy. Can get a stapler. Oh, it's hot.
Yeah. We sleep in this.
Yeah, I don't know how you sleep.
We try to sleep.
When you went to elementary school.
I'm sorry, what?
When you went to elementary school, did you have air conditioning?
No.
And-
But I was Vancouver.
Oh, yeah, it's not that hot.
It's not that hot. You know, it's not humid.
I remember in New York City, Brooklyn, wow.
You have
In those
fans?
days, they had some fans, maybe. I don't know which.
I remember